The final episode of Loki's first season has a lot of huge implications on the entire future, past, and multiverse of the MCU and Marvel as a whole. And as most people are trying to connect the dots, it's pretty evident that they in fact set up a major factor that is coming to the MCU. And of course, these reveals paving the way for the Fantastic Four. So as everybody I think knows by now, Kang the Conqueror is one of the most complex and convoluted characters in history of Marvel Comics. And that was in major part due to so many retcons, and then retcons on top of those retcons, and then multiversing retcons, and Kang just became a character that was so hard to keep track of because he could literally be revealed to be anybody throughout time, space, and history. Now when Marvel started to, for lack of better term, try to simplify Kang's existence and what exactly he means to the timeline, the future, the past, the present, and the multiverse, they decided that in the far-flung future, we would get a more streamlined version that explains every single Kang that exists. And Loki just happens to follow this model, explaining that in the 31st century, there was a man who became essentially a big factor in Kang's origin. In the comics, this character turns out to be Nathaniel Richards. If the name sounds familiar, yes, as in Richards, as in a descendant of the Richards family, aka Mr. Fantastic and Sue Storm. And Kang also goes by many names. Immortus, Ram Tut, those happen to be some of the more well-known ones. Now also in the latest episode, we saw the setup of the ending of the universe, the beginning and the birth of the universe, and how that ties into everything, very much following what Marvel Comics actually did in the comics. So again, they are seeming to now lean more into the insane, obscure, and the unique that ties everything together. So with the rumors that started to show up on the internet about a year ago, that Reed Richards would in fact connect to Kang the Conqueror somewhere down the road, and that there would be a connection between the Richards name being important in the MCU, Marvel Studios has teased, pulling in that comic book connection, and then introducing Kang in Ant-Man Quantumania, the Kang proper Kang, not the Nathaniel Richards version, which we just saw. I mean, there's definitely setup here that is happening, and I think most people that predicted, yeah, Kang is probably behind everything, were technically right. He was behind everything in Loki, just not the Kang that everybody thought. Instead, it's one of the other millions of versions that's out there because, as is explained, Kangs go after Kangs. Kangs fight Kangs. Other ones take on other identities to hide and fix the timeline in their favor. Again, they're literally pulling from the comics one-to-one. So I think you can start to see how they're already layering in the foundation of the Fantastic Four, because the importance of those characters and what they do and how intelligent Reed Richards is and what he can do is honestly all in the blueprint for what they just set up. It's just going to take a lot more explaining to get to that point, because there's a lot to go over in regards to Kang alone before we get to the Fantastic Four. And now with Loki's first season out of the way, setting up a second season, him in Quantumania, and of course the Multiverse of Madness and everything, you start to see how it's all going to fall into, well, into a giant jumbled up puzzle that makes many smaller puzzles that all connect to one bigger one. I think that's a good way to put it, probably.